Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. It's pretty normal for neighbors to share fruit from their trees, but this is the more normal way to do it. You pick some extra and drop off a bag. You don't pick your neighbor's fruit yourself. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. I don't want to share fruit with my neighbors. I'll keep this short and crisp. We bought a new house last month and it came with a big, beautiful garden, including a nice pear tree that's right by the brick wall to the neighbor's garden. I love pears. To clarify, our tree doesn't hang over the other property, but since the neighbor's garden has a higher ground level than ours, it's very easy for them to reach over the wall and pick the fruits. So a few days after moving in, I was in the garden and saw the neighbor lady picking our pears. She seemed a tiny bit embarrassed upon noticing me, but when I came closer, she said that the previous house owners didn't like pears and always allowed them to pick the fruit so they won't spoil. Fair enough. But I told her then that I happen to love pears and I'd like to keep our crop. She was visibly miffed when I told her that, but she left the fruit she picked on top of the wall, where I can't reach them, and left. I tried not to think much of it, but the next day I encountered her husband doing the same, picking the fruit. I told him the same thing I told her already, and he replied that it's only some pears and that the world would be such a bad place if everyone would make such a fuss about it like I do. I wasn't aware that I was making a fuss. I simply thought if it's my property and my tree and it doesn't hang over their garden, can I not keep it? Why does he think he's entitled to our crop? I just left then because I was so mad and I didn't want to risk saying anything mean, but I talked to my husband and he said that the neighbors are right and I shouldn't worry about it. After all, we can just buy pears in the supermarket, it's no big deal. Yeah, sure, technically he's right, but I just can't get over the entitlement of these people. If they think they have the rights to things that aren't theirs, will it stop at just fruit trees? Or will they suddenly show up in my garden, playing ball and acting like they can do anything they want, like in some creepy Netflix series? I don't want some neighborhood war or whatever, but I find their behavior preposterous. P.S. That was about a month ago, and meanwhile, all pears are gone. We haven't talked to the neighbors since, but today I remembered because the guy was giving me the stink eye when I pulled into my driveway earlier. Edit. I'll definitely be getting a net for next year, if it's not possible to move the tree. Also, I want to clarify some things. I think our tree is quite small. The brick wall is 2 meters high and the crown just grows a tiny bit higher than that, so the neighbors can only reach the top part, but I found that's where most of the crop was, at least this year. The pears are quite small and there were maybe 30 fruits on the tree when I first took a closer look as they were ripening. Maybe the harvest is bigger every 2 years. I'll be able to tell next year. Overall, I had 15 pears at most this year. The neighbors took the rest. I like eating them raw as a snack, and since they're quite small, I usually eat 2 or 3 in one go. Also, I used 5 to make a cake, so I only had pears for a week this year, while in my childhood we could mostly harvest for an entire month. Some people suggested sharing because their own trees grow more than they could eat. Well, I can surely eat and preserve 30 fruits over the course of 2 weeks. I love baking with them, and I also like making jams and conserves. The latter I couldn't even do with the few pears I managed to get this year. I'm not a hamster. I have no problem with sharing stuff if I have way too much of it. Of course not. Why would I? If I have more than I need, I'd always offer it to friends and family first before asking the neighbors. I guess this is something that differs in various countries and cultures. My husband isn't really a pushover. He just has this mentality of sharing everything and offering his own hard work for free just to be nice and help others. He's a software engineer. He also suggested that maybe our neighbors are struggling with money and that's why they took them, even after I said no. Well, I have no idea, obviously. We can't look into somebody else's life. However, I feel like it's worth mentioning here that their garden is 3 times bigger than ours, if not more. I didn't see any fruits, trees, or bushes on their property line, though. And our next story. 2 for the price of 1. I was working at a tech startup and was one of the early employees. I was one of the key people to develop the technology, which significantly helped enable them to raise tens of millions of dollars. I was told early on that they would basically take care of me as the company grew. Well, for a time at least, the company grew leaps and bounds. Again, much in part to the excellent tech I helped develop. Yet, the company had little concern for little old me. Meanwhile, they brought on a bevy of new managers and high-level people, and yet my career was basically stagnant while I was there. But then things started to slow down due to economic conditions. There had been a couple of layoffs, and I figured it was probably time to leave the sinking ship, so I lined up a new position at another company. I then went into my manager and told him that it seemed like more layoffs were imminent and that I had secured a good job offer at another company. I asked him if it would be a good idea if I should take it, and he said that he would let me know. A couple of days later, after he had discussed things with the CEO, they said I was okay and not to take the other position. I turned down the other position because I'd invested so much of myself into this company, even having sold my house and moved hundreds of miles to work at this company, and I still had a lot of stock options that I was hoping would be worth something someday. Literally, a couple of weeks later, guess what? Yep, they laid me off. Now that other position was no longer available, and because this was at the height of the recession, I was out of work for at least 4 months until I found another position. I could have even lost my house during this time, and I had to sell some cool stuff to keep paying the bills. The new position I finally found was much further from home and was a financial hardship. I would have been much better off if they'd just been honest with me and told me to take the offer I had in hand previously, but honestly, wasn't ever their policy. Anyhow, before I was involuntarily separated from the company, I was working with a Fortune 500 company that was trying to partner with us on some technology. After leaving, I got wind that they were going to invest $15 million in the company. That bothered me for several reasons, mostly because most of us were pretty sure that the crooked CEO was pilfering the company for personal gain. I'm thinking that this guy shouldn't be rewarded for his atrocious management of the company, and honestly, I didn't think that it would be a wise investment for this large company. I contacted my inside guy at the Fortune 500 and told him some of my concerns about the stewardship of the money at the startup and that it wasn't really a wise investment. This company was looking for a distribution deal for our technology, so I told them the best use of their money would be to make a deal to exchange a large blanket purchase order for stock. This way, the startup company would still get a big chunk of investment money coming in, but they would have to perform for it. It's the difference between giving a kid an allowance for no reason at all or giving a kid an allowance based on if they did their chores or not. I didn't necessarily want the investors to walk away from a partnership because I had many friends still at the company and didn't want to see them out in the cold. So my thought was that this type of deal would keep the company afloat while minimizing the potential for pilfering and better protecting the investment. All in all, if structured right, it could be a win-win and make it much more difficult for the crooked CEO and his cronies to loot the company. I additionally told them that I wouldn't recommend investing a penny unless they got a seat on the board of directors. That way, they'd have first-hand knowledge of some of the shenanigans going on behind the scenes with their money. That was about it. Now they were armed with some additional information and tactics to perhaps better protect their investment as well as help ensure that if they did invest, everything would be above board. Sometime later, I heard the CEO pulled the entire company into the conference room and chewed them a new one. He was furious because the investor had somewhat done what I had suggested. They had dropped their investment from $15 million to $5 million and had come up with some sort of blanket order or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure. But in essence, it meant a $10 million loss in the mind of the CEO. He's a bit of a fat slob, so it's quite unfortunate that he didn't just have a heart attack right then and there. No surprising, in the process, the investor was denied the board seat, and one can only guess why. Dirty secrets and all. In fact, one of the board members that the CEO did bring on board had already done time for defrauding his clients, a marriage made in heaven, I guess. So not necessarily meant as revenge, but sweet nonetheless. The company basically lost $10 million because of what they did to me, and they were all but expecting this money. Had they not laid me off, I probably wouldn't have even thought about putting the investors' interests above that of the corrupt company. In the end, surprising to no one, the investor eventually got majorly screwed by the unscrupulous startup company anyways. The two companies had some disagreements about their distribution agreement, and the investor ended up having to pay a major settlement to the startup company after a contentious mediation. But never fear, don't screw with the Fortune 500. As the startup company was starting to gasp its last breath, they were working on a promising deal with another company they had identified as a major potential customer, one that would put them back on track to financial success and further line the CEO's dirty pockets. Well, the Fortune 500 company got wind of the deal, bought the other company, and then shut down the deal. That's ninja-level revenge. So in the end, 2 revenges for the price of 1. I couldn't have been happier to hear about the karmic justice once again hitting the company. Now the company's all but dead. All physical assets went to auction, the CEO's milking the last few dollars out of the account, but because our SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, is all but worthless, he'll start another venture and the cycle will repeat itself. The sad thing is that the CEO, in my humble opinion, makes Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of Theranos, look like Mother Teresa. I pray that one day they'll do a Netflix docuseries exposing all that went on at this mess of a company. I can guarantee you, it'll be quite a hit. Yeah, that's why if your employer says your job is safe and to not take the new offer, ask for it in writing signed off by the CEO. That way if they screw you, you can sue them. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.